going to go 7 weeks through this fantastic book. Just this past week, and on this YouTube channel, we released a long-form teaching on the same book to kind of give an overview of it and some key themes and concepts behind the writing. And then this course, even if you didn't go through the long form, or if you'd like to watch it online, you can then join this course. It'll be an awesome time to get into the finer details of this book of Paul's, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So it begins Monday night at 7 p.m. on the 26th of February for 7 weeks. Sign up on the hub so we know to expect that you're coming, and then we will see you there. Then a few weeks after that, March 1st and 2nd, is our WM at Home Retreat. Info and registrations on the hub. It'll be an awesome time, ladies. So we are definitely getting close to the end of the opportunity to sign up, as we do need to have our numbers in to make food and all that. So if you've been thinking about it, now is the time to stop thinking and start doing. Sign up for it, and we will have you there. It'll be an awesome time for the ladies. And then our AGM is coming up on March 19th. So we would love to have everyone that considers Living Springs home welcome there, and sharing, hearing, participating. Our AGMs tend to be, if you believe it or not, actually a pretty fun time. We try to get through them fast and with a lot of fun. So they aren't the AGMs that I've been at in many other environments, but instead this one's a lot of fun. So you can keep up to date about all the things both in this past year as well as things we're looking forward to at the church, though members are the only ones that will have a voting opportunity but everyone is welcome. So if you want to be a member and have a vote for any voting matters at the AGM, you'll need to come to that membership class. See the last two announcements. Then we've got book club. We'll start pushing March's book. This one is Every Good Endeavor by Tim Keller. And it's going to be on March 28th at 7:30 p.m. as always, and we would look forward to having you. This book is one for helping connect the idea of God's work and God's world to your work and your environment. I know sometimes people feel a disconnect between how to have their faith in one part of their life and see how their work connects to their faith and their view of the world. And so this is an opportunity to read through Tim Keller's book and get a little bit of comprehension there. Then Good Friday and Easter Sunday, want to make that a reminder for you. Start putting it on your calendar as it's again quickly approaching. On Good Friday on the 29th will be another Stations of Reflection. We are waiting on some final confirmation. We've attempted to book a park here within Airdrie, but just means of communication are not complete. So we'll announce finer details, but you can put it on your calendar. We're going to have that in the morning. Stations of Reflection as we have the last few years, but it may be a different environment. Stay tuned. And then on Easter Sunday on the 31st, we will be having 3 gatherings at 9, 10:15, and 11:30. There's a choir that's been meeting and preparing for that one, and it's always just an awesome time to welcome family and friends, and so we would love to have you at that gathering. And then last, a couple of quick reminders just of things that are always going on here at Living Springs. One is that we've got a youth group that meets Wednesday nights from 7 to 8:30. There's also a parent chat on our app. If you want to go to your app store and search for Living Springs Airdrie, you'll find our app. And within that, in the chat function, then you can find that. That keeps parents up to date of what's going on, events, curriculum, all that, so you can know what's taking place and even ask questions and connect with one another. Then last but certainly not least is social media. Now, you found 1/3 of that by being here and finding us online and watching probably on this YouTube channel. But we also have an Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, we are Airdrie Living Springs, and then Facebook, we're Living Springs Airdrie. I won't get into the backstory of that, but you can find us either way. I'm sure even no matter what you search, Living Springs and Airdrie in some combination will come up. But we'd love to keep you up to date and see some of our content there. So if you're on social media, we'd love to connect you there. With that, we'll jump into our time of sanctuary. And so we always begin with a song. And this week, I picked again, I love this song, Build My Life. And so connect with God however you best do so. If that's muting the TV or your computer or phone, wherever you're watching this, and just taking a few minutes to connect with God in silence, please do it. If you want to sit and listen, if you want to sing along, whatever works. But this is your space to connect with God as this song plays.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe, we live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe, we live for you. Oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe, we live for you. Oh, we live for you. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. I will build my
And now we're going to jump to a reading from Romans 4, verses 13 to 17. For the promise to Abraham, or to his descendants, that he would be the heir of the world was not through the law, but through the righteousness by faith. For if those of the law are heirs, faith is rendered void and promise is nullified. For the law produces wrath, but where there is no law, neither is there transgression. Because of this, it is by faith, in order that it may be according to grace, so the promise may be secure to all descendants, not only to those of the law, but also to those of faith in Abraham, who is the father of us all. As we jump into our time of communion, I was looking through my notes and just again came across one of my favorite ones I really enjoyed. Where I was referring to Charles Finney. Charles Finney was an early revivalist and was kind of the founder of what we would call an altar call. And there's a whole conversation that could be had there. But this idea of wanting people to respond to faith after having preached, and so people would come forward and want to respond to that. But they didn't just come forward, as we may often assume, and walk forward and then get prayed for or make a prayer themselves and then head out. Charles had something different in mind, and I loved it, where when people would respond, they would come up to receive their salvation that way or commit themselves to faith. And not only did they come up to meet him on his own, but he had a legal document waiting for them. This legal document would sign that if they owned slaves, they would free them all. So if you want to accept Jesus, free your slaves. It was this profound idea that he said you cannot be receiving of Jesus and then hold somebody else a hostage, a slave for yourself, and treat an image bearer of Christ in such a way. And so if you want to take this faith seriously, there is going to be a cost. And though I'm thankful that is nowhere near our context today, we often come to the idea of communion and grace and want to just receive, and there is something very beautiful to receive. Don't get me wrong. But I think oftentimes we may forget the cost. We may forget the things that we want to give up in order to have the fullness of Christ working in our life. And so to come and to receive is an important idea that we come here. Not that it's conditional, but it's shaped by a dynamic response of the gospel that we say we want to be like Jesus. And to receive what he has given us, we also want to become like him. And so we need to consider that each time we come to communion. So with that in mind, maybe just take a moment and reflect. Where is Jesus leading me to create more space in my life for him? Where is more Christ-likeness needed? Where am I harboring hate or power over others? Where am I treating image bearers of Christ as they should not be? And so this question rings out in my mind, hopefully in yours as well, that as we receive it, we are also then challenged to live by it. And so with that said, we take the bread. Remember, this is Jesus' body broken for us. We do this not only in remembrance of just remembering him right now, but in remembrance in living out what he did for us. Let's remember together. In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, offering it as a representation of his blood. And so today, again, we take this, as Paul put it, we proclaim his death until he comes. Let's proclaim together. Jesus, I thank you for all the blessings, the joy, the grace, the freedom that you offer. But we also know that comes at a cost. And there are many things and many ways in which we don't represent who you are. So I pray that as we receive again this week, we would be reminded of how, in different ways and led by your Spirit, to allow us to see the ways in which we can become more Christ-like. So would you allow us to release of those things that we are still holding on to, that are not of you? Would you give the strength to do it, but would we see the fruit of your kingdom on the other side of it? In your name, amen. Well, we jump into our second week of this Tales from the Deep series. I have to admit, I tried to sneak a pun in there and make it Tales, T-I-L-E-S, from the deep, just with our graphics set as it was. But I, for once, got vetoed on graphics. So there we go. I don't know if I actually would have followed through with it. But I was really excited about this series. I was chatting with my neighbor, actually, and she is at her Anglican church, participant in there and a deacon there, and so she gets to speak and be a part of their liturgy at their church. And so we were chatting about the different sections of scripture that we would be teaching through this weekend. She's also teaching. And the common book of prayer and the leaning for the lectionary calendar for the Anglicans is going through the book of Mark, which has, again, great reflections around the season of Lent. But then I was sharing with her that we have intentionally gone into the book of Jonah, and she thought that was a great call. This book is a great fit for this season because it's meant to casually, I think, call out our misgivings. I love watching stand-up comedy. It is something beautiful, I think, in a critique of our world, a critique of our culture, and in subtle ways. There's something about the humor that allows people's guards to come down. Or we're laughing and kind of in the spirit of kind of just joy that is there. And then things can be said that are really poignant that we wouldn't be able to hear otherwise, that can call us to have concern and a new focus or perspective on things that we are even participating ourselves. Really see it as an art form and a critique of culture that is much needed and I think should be protected in a lot of ways. And though much of it's lost on us in translation and difference in culture and the ways that we've been taught to put expectations on the Bible, the book of Jonah is actually written as a satire. That doesn't bring into debate necessarily the context of it historically, but its genre is a satire. A satire is the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues, maybe such as religion. And so there is something that is written into this book. It's formed to be a critique for us, to see the ways that we may be foolishly following into participation in life with God. So it uses a number of these literary devices. Humor is one to make some great points. Daniel Timmer had this to say, that the genre which the reader assigns to Jonah, consciously or not, determines how it is read and thus what it means. So we want to come to this book, and again, I think sometimes we've put expectations on it for it just to be a historical narrative. And maybe that's the case, but its genre, again, I think is a satire. And so when we finally kind of flip the light on how to read it, things will stand out for us to be able to hear them and see them and be shaped and influenced by them. For instance, everything in Jonah is large. So, for instance, in Jonah 1:4, and Yahweh hurled a great wind upon the sea, and it was a great storm in the sea. 1:10, and the men were greatly afraid. 1:16, and the men feared Yahweh greatly. And then in 3:2, get up and go to Nineveh, the great city. In 3:3, so Jonah got up and went to Nineveh according to the word of Yahweh. Now Nineveh was an extraordinarily great city, a journey of 3 days to cross. I'm going to pause on that one. I went on Google Maps. I looked up the average walking speed of an adult. It was like 4.32 kilometers per hour, something like that. It would only take you 10 hours to walk from Balzac to Okotoks. 10 hours. That's it. Nineveh supposedly took 3 days to walk across. We don't have any record of a city that large in the ancient world. And so again, it's just using this imagery to an exaggeration to make points. Everything's big and all that. Not only that, but everything happens at a fast pace in Jonah. And then Jonah went, and then they did this, and then they did that. It all happens quickly. The exaggeration isn't the only tool used. Humor is also a prominent tool in Jonah. My favorite is right at the beginning. We meet this man named Jonah, and Jonah actually means dove, son of truth, and faithfulness. These are the ideas that would have come to mind. Now, dove was the universal sign for the Hebrews, as well as the Christian history, of peace. Now, there is nothing that says peace like a man who's going through chaotic storms and down to Sheol and beasts and fire, and all the things of this story are completely not peaceful. Then truth and faithfulness, nothing says truth and faithfulness like God giving you a call and you deciding to go the other way. Right off the bat, the audience would have heard these things, knowing that meaning in the name, and immediately let their guard down as they laugh at this foolish prophet named Jonah and how he's not living up to his name. It's this beautiful book for the Hebrew audience, setting the entertaining of the story before we jump into and all of a sudden see ourselves in the story, again, like comedy, with our guards down a bit. And so as we jump into week 2 of this Lenten series, reflecting on the story of Jonah and finding ourselves in the story, we'll be jumping into chapter 2. But to give a quick recap of the story or of last week, if you were able to hear it or weren't able to hear it, Jonah receives a call from Nineveh to go to God, the capital city of Israel's greatest threat, of Assyria, to preach grace and mercy to them. So again, context helps us understand what's going on here. This is not just a random city that he didn't like, but this is their greatest enemy and their greatest threat, about to actually imprison them. He headed the opposite way to Tarshish, which is the capital of luxury and allure in his mind. God, wanting to redirect Jonah, stirs up a great storm as he's traveling. The storm gets so violent that even the trained sailors all fear for their lives. Jonah knows he's the reason for the storm and tells them that if they pick him up and throw him out, the storm will stop. Note that Jonah was not willing to jump off for others. He said, hey guys, I'm sure if you grabbed me and threw me off, then the storm would stop. He's not like, hey guys, I got this. I'll do something for somebody else. No, selfish Jonah. It's just all throughout this book. They do so, and then when the storm stops, they recognize the greatness of Jonah's God and offer a sacrifice to God and vow themselves to him. Which, and again, another kind of humorous point, sometimes the best witness is showing that you're the problem and see God's work through you by getting rid of yourself. God sends a fish to swallow him up, and he's in it for 3 days before we pick up here in Jonah chapter 2. But beyond the exaggeration and the humor, there's another pattern that sets the scene for chapter 2, where we're going to find our unfaithful prophet in just a moment when we read Jonah chapter 2. And so it goes this way. Throughout this whole book, there's a direction in which Jonah is heading. He goes down to Joppa in 1:3. He goes down to get to the boat. He goes down below deck to the innermost part of the ship in 1:5. He lays down when he's down there. He falls into a deep sleep. Again, that image of down. The sailors throw him overboard, and he goes down below the ship into the open waters. He goes down into the depths, the very heart of the seas. He goes down to the roots and bars of the mountain, and he gets shut out of creation into the realm of the dead. It's this constant pattern throughout this book to say Jonah is going down, 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 down. And so all these images are being captured by the Hebrew audience, not necessarily as always by us. And so there's humor, there's the literary pattern to show he's down at this low moment. He's really kind of what is expected. When we see somebody living foolishly, of course that's not going to work out for them. And so it's the natural trajectory that they assume. And so all these things working together in the mind of the original audience to make these points. In the ancient mind, the world was understood in this way. That the sea was a realm of chaos. Understandable for an ancient mind to be able to be on the sea and a storm wipes up. Man, this is an environment we cannot control. And so they saw it as a realm of chaos. Then down below the sea was where Sheol was, kind of the place of the dead. Then below that was the pillars that held up all of the world from their perspective. So the oceans are a realm of chaos, and Jonah is down not just at the place of the dead. He's past that in his story as he goes on. He's basically, in his understanding, outside of creation. He is just so far down, he's removed from the known world in any form. And so this is where we catch Jonah with all these things in mind, this unfaithful representation of his name and all those things as we pick up and read Jonah chapter 2. From the inside of the fish, this is all after 3 days, Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God, and he said, "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From the deep in the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the depths in the very heart of the seas, and the current swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again toward your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed has wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, Lord, my God, brought me up to life from the pit. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayers rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you. What I have said, what I have vowed, I will make good. I will say, salvation comes from the Lord. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Best verse of the whole thing. Jonah's prayer is striking, consider his situation. It's a beautiful prayer and surprisingly well crafted for being in the belly of a fish. If I had a nickel for all the times that I would craft a message, a nice, beautiful prayer inside of a fish, I'd have no money. But the surprising part of Jonah's prayer is this, that there were none of those words that were Jonah's. It's this beautiful prayer, and it seems to fit his situation really well. But instead, Jonah's words are all source and ideas and concepts and words and patterns from the Psalms. Commentators can, and I'm sure I could pass along even resources for you if you're interested, to see where each one of the lines and which Psalm they are coming from, which for the most part is actually a beautiful thought. That Jonah's imagination is so formed by his scriptures that is what comes out in this low part of his life. His imagination and the way that he wants to pray and his language is formed by something before him. Many of us pray in dire straits, but what we fail to recognize is our prayers are often formulated long before we make them. I grew up in a world of church where spontaneous prayer was seen as the highest, most authentic form of prayer. And yet I've come over time to realize it has been incredibly helpful to learn from prayers from other people. And so going to prayers from ancient sources, or even just people that have lived a beautiful life of faith and written these prayers down, have been so helpful for me. These prayers have helped shape the language with which I pray, the things that I pray for, and it's given me new perspective instead of praying so selfishly. And Jonah exemplifies, I think, for the first time in the story, something good. His imagination is formed by the Hebrew scriptures because he's spent time there. Yet many of our prayers can be focused by economic markets, praying for blessing in the way we understand the world to be, cultural individualism, a worldview shaped more by political ends than biblical ideas, images of success through social media instead of scripture that will come out in our prayers. I have loved, again, for the vast number of years, accessing prayers beyond myself so I can pray beyond me. There's an author we cite often enough, Brian Zond, and he actually runs a number of times a year a prayer school. And he put it this way when kind of showing one of the pitches for his prayer school. Was if we are to do anything in life and want to get better at it, we will often go to a source of somebody with experience. You want to be a better hockey player, you go get a coach. You want to be a weightlifter, you find a new program. You follow whatever it is to grow in something. And then we get to prayer, one of the, I think, the most important things we can do, conversing with our Creator, and we go, I got this. I'll figure it out on my own. Instead of spending this time to realize and have ourselves shaped and grown by people who have done it faithfully for so well. So Jonah, in this time of pressure, speaks the words from Scripture. And it's a beautiful idea. But it brings this thought then what is forming our view of the world is also forming our imagination for prayer. This is an important concept for us to realize. And so where we spend our time and our attention not only is just time used, and that's something to consider on its own, but it's also then praying, forming our prayer life. The things that we think about, the things that we most desire, the things that we want to communicate to God, how we see ourselves in any given situation are being shaped and formed by what we spend our time on. I'm not here to critique or say the idea is for us to remove ourselves from culture. That is not, I think, the Christian response. But instead to be considerate of what we are participating in. So when we go to speak with God, what has formed our life of prayer? And that's where I stopped giving Jonah some credit, because this book is a really hard one to catch. Pun fully intended. It's kind of like trying to catch a slippery fish. There are multiple ways to read it and can mean wildly different things. As I sat with this prayer all week, the number of the things that I was saying, even just a couple days ago, I was saying to Doug, I might try to jam 2 sermons into one, because this prayer can be read in this beautiful sense of Jonah has been formed by the scriptures and has these great things to say. And it's like, I've got hope. I'm hoping he's going to figure it out. And it can be read then with a different inflection and go, man, this guy is just so far off as we read it. And so the beautiful ideas in Jonah's prayer are there on the surface, but the minute you start paying attention to the whole of it, it starts to smell a little funky. And as we get into it, for instance, Jonah 2:3, he says, "And you threw me into the deep in the heart of the sea." He starts blaming God for being thrown into the sea. If I remember correctly, Jonah, you were actually asked by God to go to a place where he was going to be faithful and work through you, and we'll see that later in the story. But instead, you went the opposite direction, and then you convinced people to throw you into the sea. So I think it was the sailors on your idea for your consequence. And so he's missing the whole idea. In Jonah 2:4, he says, "And I said, I am banished from your sight." Again, Jonah, I don't think you realize that God has been having his eye on you to keep you safe in even the most chaotic realm that you can imagine. I think God's aware of you. Jonah 2:8-9, "Those who worship vain idols forsake their loyal love. But I, with a voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. I will fulfill what I have vowed. Deliverance belongs to Yahweh." He's really quick to throw other people under the bus. Those who forsake idols, worship idols, forsake their loyal love. I don't think he has been the epitome of faithfulness and loyal love to God in this story so far. And then beyond that, to jump ahead a little bit, these promises that he makes and these vows that he says, "I will give a voice of thanksgiving and a sacrifice to you," we have no record of him even doing that. And so Jonah's prayer seems beautiful and is formed by the right things, but it has not done something for in reality and authenticity in his heart. Jonah is writing checks on his own righteousness that he can't seem to cash. Jonah is disconnected from reality when conversing with God. I was actually sitting last Sunday when I first started thinking about this specific point. And in my own prayer life, I was convicted that I so often do want to paint myself better than I am when I come to God. When I've got a request or something I've got concern about or something that's weighing heavily on my heart, I try to justify it. But God, I did this, and God, I did this, forgetting about the things that I didn't do and the things that I did do that were not Christ-like. I'm so tempted, like Jonah, to elevate myself and contrast others. Well, God, I've been so much more faithful than that person. Won't tell you who that I'm talking about, but... And so I look at my life and go, I'm doing pretty good. I make promises, I'm sure, as well, that I can't cash. God, I want to be so faithful to you. I'm going to be so faithful to you, whatever it may be. And yet my life often shows the complete opposite. And that my reality is not often connected to the way that I pray. And so I have this illusion or want even to paint it. And all these schemes actually point us to one thing. We, like Jonah, trust more in our own image than the character of our great and merciful God. That the whole concept of us doing this is actually thinking that I need to bank on who I am instead of being in awe and amazement of the grace and mercy that God continues to show. Jonah is in the middle of this parable and he's been so unfaithful. He's in the midst of a storm where nobody else would have ever imagined he would have lived. I think a Hebrew reader would have gone, "Oh, well, he's down in the chaos waters. That's where that story ends. Close book. Must be over." And God's faithfulness goes even beyond the realm of reality that they could comprehend. The book of Jonah in so many ways is a parable to challenge its readers to imagine a God bigger than the one they're familiar with. To trust in that God and imagine that he will be faithful. I don't need to justify myself in front of him. In fact, it's probably better when I realize humbly how far I am from him and then lean on his grace and mercy instead of my own character. This book then allows us to watch and laugh at the ridiculous of Jonah's prayer, though it also gives us permission to recognize the same in ourselves in a safe way that then helps us want to change. I think the last thing to consider about Jonah's prayer as we near closing, would be to quickly look at what it is that is what is missing in the prayer. A couple of things is that Jonah misses the opportunity to enjoy a mutual relationship dynamic in his prayer. A couple of things exemplify this. Not once does he repent for the disobedience that led him to his present predicament. He has nowhere in that whole prayer says, "God, I was unfaithful. I'm sorry I didn't listen." Nothing happens there. In any good human relationship, there is ownership over our misgivings. And Jonah fails to do that. I don't think there is such thing as a human or other dynamic relationship between two entities that can happen without ownership over those things. And so Jonah fails to do that. He really wants to get out of it, and he does a good job of buttering God up with some nice words, but he fails to own where his own misgivings and failings in the relationship and where they were. Not only that, it is connected then is that the prophet assumes he'll be exiting the fish from the same direction he entered. He says a couple different times in different ways, I will again look at your temple and all those things. His assumption seems to be this fish is going to spit him back out, back where he started from. Again, going, God, I know you wanted me to go to Nineveh, and I disobeyed, and then you saved me even in my disobedience, but you're not going to make me do that whole Nineveh thing, right? And again, it is failure to recognize the relationship dynamic that should have been there, and that God is a person that he's interacting with. There isn't a compromise in his willingness to make right the disconnect that he created. And while thanking God for saving him from death, the prophet appears to assume, like I said, that he'll be exiting the fish from the same direction he entered. Jonah's repeated attention is his to his presumed independence and bringing about his own deliverance reveals a strongly egocentric perspective in the most unsuitable of contexts. Two specific spots where this is most evident. Jonah 2:2, I called from my distress, Yahweh, and he answered me from the belly of Sheol. I cried for help, and you heard my voice. It's like, well, God, I called you here, so like, you're welcome for showing you where I was. It's this entirely egocentric perspective that he thinks he was a part of God's grace being given to him. In Jonah 2:7, when my life was ebbing away from me, I remembered Yahweh, and my prayer came to you, to your holy temple. Instead of God, you remembered me in this low spot. He becomes so central, his thoughts are so central on himself. Jonah prays for how he wants things to go instead of openness to God's next step. And Jonah falls and keeps his perspective on only himself. Not even to mention the fact that there's a whole people group waiting for him to go be a messenger of God's faithfulness and grace towards them. We have the opportunity to find a partner in God through prayer. And to be honest, I think we do much of the same. Forgetting God's grace, forgetting where we have failed, forgetting all the things of how he is faithful towards us. But we have the opportunity to find a partner in God through prayer. The most beautiful part of all this, though, is that God is merciful with Jonah in spite of his shortcomings, and he will do the same with us. I think this is such an important part. It would be so easy for us to then go, well, why even try? Because I know I'm rotten. I know there's also parts of Christianity that express this, like, I'm the worst and I'm a sinner and I'm like a dirty rag, and so why even bother? The thing is that God is showing his grace and mercy here. Let's recognize that our prayers are formed by outside forces and then seek to grow in them, not wait until we are better to begin praying. To abandon our egos and lean into prayer, assuming that God's character can far outrun our righteousness. Let us find relationship with our Creator in prayer and seek a mutuality in prayer. These are the things that we're being invited to. It's really easy to laugh at Jonah, and then while we're laughing at Jonah, go, but I can do the same things. And so this invitation to prayer, to consider how it's formed and who we're thinking of, and the focus of our prayer and the assumptions we make, and that we're in a conversation with God, are important things to consider as we look at our own prayer life. So again, I hope the humor of Jonah helps bring our defenses down for us to look at these things, to realize there's space to grow. And on the other side of that growth, there's continued joy and blessing and faithfulness. A couple of reflection questions then for you to look at in closing is this. What is the imagination of your prayer life formed by? And what would better help form it? I think this is a lifelong pursuit that, again, you can do it for a while and then other things sneak in. And so it's a pursuit and a consideration we take, I think, for a long while. Are your prayers grounded in a reality or an elevated righteousness of your own? This is a hard one. Again, maybe just for me. I won't ask for a show of hands. Does your prayer life encompass a mutual relationship between you and God, or is it egocentric? You can discuss those with people if you've got them with you, or take time to reflect on them. But it would be my great joy to bless you in closing. So if you'd raise your hands wherever and whenever you're watching this. May you find refuge in the fullness of the triune God. May your spirit rest in his mercy and the joy of salvation. May your gratitude and commitment to the Lord's will be strengthened through the depths of your journey. In the name of God, of the God of second chances. Amen. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time as we continue exploring these tales from the deep.